Good evening and welcome to another edition, Down to the Wire. I'm your host, dermatologist, and joining me again as co-host, Camping with Candace, Candace here. Candace, this week we go Super Saturday 2, and we're going to take 2 races from Keeneland, and then we're going to go to 4 stakes races of the 6 at Belmont. The Belmont's a little bit tricky with the weather, and Keeneland maybe a little bit of rain as well, but first off, some big fields here at Keeneland for the Futurity and the Shadwell Mile. Let's start with the Futurity.
The British Futurity we have here, we have a big field. It's an interesting field too because we have a shipper in here, which we're not used to seeing on the dirt races, but we have Hawkbill, who's the son of Kitten's Joy out of a Giant's Causeway mare, has won 3 straight over on the synthetic over in England, comes here for a Mighty Godolphin group and gets Lasix for the first time, so will be very interesting to see how he does. I would, with Godolphin and their typical aims, I would certainly think that should he run well here, you would expect maybe Dubai, UAE Derby, or maybe for him to go up to New York perhaps, where they tend to run a lot of their horses. So a very interesting inclusion in this group. For me, the horse who I've been looking at for a while and I think fits very well in this spot is Rated R Superstar, who comes in here for Ken McPeak. This is a horse who's done very little wrong. He finished second on debut before breaking his maiden over at Ellis by 5 lengths. I thought he ran a very nice race behind Cocked and Loaded in the Iroquois. And again, a horse with a plan. Ken McPeak has said all along that this horse would be coming to this race before running, hopefully in the Juvenile on Breeders' Cup Day. So I think Rated R Superstar has a big chance in here. I think the horse who I guess I'm pretty much against is Uncle Vinny, and we've said that every time he's ran, but I couldn't have him in this spot. As far as some others, if you're playing exactas, playing trifectas, it might not pay a lot, but Exaggerator warrants a long look in here. The large field should probably suit him with his come-from-behind style. His win over Saratoga Mischief and the Saratoga Special was a nice one. And it just seems like these Sormo brothers have a ton of young horses who are very talented. I think they've been, pretty astute with buying some horses as of late, and this seems to be another one who, with time and distance, figures to only get better.
Yeah, it's an interesting race. We've been pretty much right on Uncle Vinny. We threw him in the Tremont, and then he lost by 8 lengths in the Hopeful, and in the Sanford, he really didn't win that race. It's just the jockey decided to ride him late, and he snuck second. And now at the post position draw, I don't think you can really expect Uncle Vinny to win out of that 12 hole. He's just not that good. I do have some distance concerns with Rated R Superstar with that Kodiak Cowboy breeding. So I pretty much got it down to Hawkbill and Exaggerator. Exaggerator was fairly impressive in the Saratoga Special. The connections are, winning right now, and I think they're pointing for this race, so he's very gettable. But I'm going to go with Hawkbill. I think we saw last week that Raise the Bar was ready to go, and I just think those mile races, 7-furlong races on the synthetic play longer than they are. And even though he faced a couple of small fields in those last 2 races, he did face some big fields in his other 2 races. Every once in a while, you do get a Kitten's Joy that can run on the dirt, and I just think this horse is well-bred and gets good first Lasix and Mike Smith. So I'm going to go with Hawkbill. I really don't think Uncle Vinny's going to win out of the 12 hole. You could make a case for Stick Stately Dude. I think even Uncle Jerry maybe coming off the synthetic and going to the real dirt could maybe get a little bit of a bounce forward. I just have distance concerns with Rated R Superstar.
Yeah, as far as Hawkbill goes, he would be one who I would be using as well as could hit the board. It'll be interesting to see where he figures on the tote because I think he has a couple of conflicting things. People would see Godolphin, they'll see First Lasix, they'll see Mike Smith, and I think they, some people will latch onto that, but then the reverse, you'll see people who say Kitten's Joy, they see the turf, and they might be pushed away from that. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of a price we can get on him. If we can get 4 to 1 or thereabouts, I think that's very fair. I agree with you. We have seen some kittens who can go on the dirt. The Giant's Causeway underneath is probably a little helpful with that. He's kind of sometimes adds some versatility to the surfaces that his progeny can run over. And to me, I just think Godolphin knows. Godolphin, they have very, very good records overseas on the synthetic. They kind of dominate those races over there. And to me, they wouldn't bring a Son of Kitten's Joy out of a Giant's Causeway mare. You know, a lot of American breeding to come out here with the obvious intention of running in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile if they didn't know this horse was going to run over the dirt fine, you know, win or not, but they're not going to bring him out here to embarrass themselves.
The post positions, I think, is going to be a key to the Shadwell Mile, and competitive field, and I'm not even really sure who's going to be favored here, because I think a couple of horses drew so bad, I just think people are going to take off them, especially if the course comes up a little bit soft.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. Betting wise, I don't see a heavy favorite in here. The Pizza Man will take money. He always does. I think a mile's too short. I've said that all along. I don't understand this. Now we want to make him a miler thing. I thought if you had run him in the Breeders' Cup Turf, that he would have every bit as chance of anybody there. So I don't understand this plan with him at all. Bobby's Kitten is in here, but they've said that they want to run him at 5.5 furlongs too. So I don't know if he's going to run here. If he does, he takes money, but you couldn't have him. Just the fact alone they entered him in a 5.5 furlong race to me says it all. And it's not that he's necessarily even fast enough to win over 5.5. It just tells me they've given up as far as trying to get him to settle in races. So if they don't think he can settle, then I sure don't. So I don't want him here. Dutch Connection should take some money. He's a dual Group 3 winner overseas. He's a very nice horse. He certainly wants firm ground. Charlie Hills as well, bringing horses out here. He brought Crescelium, who won the Juvenile Fillies. He brought Just the Judge, who won here last year, among a few others. So when he points horses out here, they usually do well, and this is one that they've been saying since April or May, that he's going to come here, and they've stuck to that. This would be his distance, a mile. No Lasix. I think I'd rather see him on it just because we expect some improvement when they get it, but that's typical of Hills. He doesn't usually give his runners Lasix when they come here, and they seem to do fine. So not so much a negative for him with that. He's drawn well. It'll be interesting to see what he does. I think I would say of the imports, War Envoy, Collini, and Dutch Connection. That Dutch Connection to me clearly is the class of those. And I think you need to use him to hit the board. For me, I think though the horse I'd be looking at to win here at, you know, maybe some sort of a price, but again, he's one who always takes money, is Tourist. Thought he was fantastic first up at Kentucky Downs. I did not expect him to run that big of a race first time off of a very, very long layoff. This is a race that, although it's a large field, I guess it'll be dependent on what Bobby's Kitten does. But if Bobby's Kitten in particular doesn't run, I just don't see a ton of speed in here. I think they've been, you know, it seems they've been very methodical with how they've brought him back to have him ready for these late season races. And I mean, he only has one way to go from that draw, but I do think...
Well, Heart to Heart has pretty much had the lead in every race he ever runs or presses for it. I mean, and King Crease is always up there. I mean, it seems to me that's, and if Bobby goes, that's
yeah,
three.
But if Bobby doesn't run, though, I mean, like Heart to Heart, yeah, King Crease, though, goes forward, but he's not fast. I think Taurus is genuinely fast. So I don't know if King Crease could get the lead from Taurus. I mean, either way, I think this is a horse who has really rounding into good form now. Second time off the layoff. I mean, I think he should run better than he did last time, and the last time was pretty dang good. So I'm gonna go Taurus, Dutch Connection next. That's an exacta. I think I would be very interested in playing.
Yeah, it's an interesting race because I do see a bunch of speed in the race. I see more speed with just horses that, I'm not saying they're fast, I just know Heart to Heart, you ain't getting the lead off that guy. And King Crease likes to be forwardly placed. I just have a feeling Bobby's going to go just because it's at Keeneland and Ramsey's going to want to run him in a $1 million race. So I think he's going to go. Jack Milton, you know, he's a presser. Seek Again's a presser, but he's got the 13 holes, so where do they go? Tourist was definitely impressive at Kentucky Downs. I think he'll get overbet a little bit off that race, and he very well can win, and I don't think he needs the lead. Yeah, I'm just saying I think there's other speed in this race, so he's going to have to prove that he can come off the pace.
Yeah.
I do think it's a great prep for the Pizza Man for the 1.5-mile turf race. It's the exact opposite of what they're doing with Honor Code. Honor Code has no speed. They're putting him in a speed race.
Yes.
Pizza Man is a total router distance horse. Now they're throwing him in a speed race. So I totally get what they're doing.
But they said Breeders' Cup Mile is possible. That's where it gets weird for me.
Yeah, although, I mean, Ramsey kind of opens up his mouth a lot this time of the year. So, you know, he's not as one that I'm not as worried about. So I'm going to go with Heart to Heart just because I think he's going to take some beating on the front end. He's a pretty gritty horse. So, you know, I would be tempted to go with Seek again if he didn't have that 13 hole. But I just can't take a horse out of the 13 hole. And to be honest, that's probably why I'm not going with Tourist, just because I just think all 5 of those outside horses are pretty good horses, and somebody's going to get a bad trip out of there, and who knows who it's going to be.
If you're looking for a little bit of value, though, in these exactas, these trifectas, or even to win, one we didn't mention who I think warrants a long look is Grand Arch. And if we say, oh, well, there's some speed in here, this could be a horse who just trips out of the race. And I mean, last time we saw him, he beat Ironicus, who did nothing to, you know, make that form look bad, that's for sure. So Grand Arch could be one who I think could drift up a little bit in price and might be the play in here, at least to hit the board. I'd be surprised. I think he would need some trip troubles to not hit the board here.
I think it's wide open. I think the favorite will be 9-2 or 5-1. And like I say, my gut says Tourist is going to be favored. Just he was hammered pretty hard in that Kentucky Downs race off a long layoff, and he was bet consistently last year in every single race. So I think Seek again would have took some money if he wouldn't have been in the 13 hole. The 2 Euros are going to take some money, so we'll see how the odds shake out. I do think the favorite will be 9-2. I do see any one of 6 or 7 horses that are capable of winning it. It's just a tough race to imagine who's going to get the trip and what the fractions are going to be. But Heart to Heart, I think, will be longer odds because he doesn't have all of the connections. So I think he's going to be 15-1, and I think he can be kind of gritty on the front end for a long ways in that race. But who knows if that's good enough to win. We go to Belmont, and let's start off with the Kelso. Small field, a couple of horses got taken out of here, and it looks like it's going to be a sloppy track. I mean, it's kind of the way you have to handicap it, but
Yeah.
It's a tricky race to read anyways.
It is. I think, you know, we see a lot of times in these small fields that you can really get some kind of wonky results. You know, had the track been dry, I think I would have given a very, very long look to Appealing Tail, who hasn't done a whole lot wrong this year. You know, he just seems like all year over in California, he's always been in the mix, and he's one who it just seems like he's been in great form. And at the morning line price of 6-1, I think that would have been, you know, a nice one to, you know, bet to win in this sort of a race. But, you know, should the track come up wet, which, like we say, seems incredibly likely, well, then now this makes it a lot more difficult. A wet track, you think people will hammer Honor Code even more. I don't think necessarily that's the way to go. I mean, of course, he's fantastic over the slump. We saw that on his debut, and he thrives on a wet track. But I think there are a few others in here who also like the wet surface, who maybe are a little bit more in tune with this distance of a mile. I think for me, the one who I'd bet, and people, you know, maybe now they will have jumped off of him, but My Loot would be one who I would certainly expect to move up over a sloppy surface. We go back to his Kentucky Derby, where there was a sloppy track, and he ran a fantastic race there to just miss hitting the board in that race, despite having some trip troubles. He has not been in the same form this year, but I think taking him back to a mile, for one, is a very, very key move with him. And then should the track come up wet, he is one who has shown an ability to run a big race over a sloppy track. 12-1, I'm okay with that. So I would go with My Loot here.
Yeah, I can't take Honor Code. I just don't think he's a miler. I think he's lost all semblance of speed this year. And normally I say, you know, class trumps pace, but in this case, he's just too slow. I mean, he's just going to get 10, 15 lengths behind this field, and I don't care if he likes a slop or not. I just think the fractions are going to be slow, and he's not going to get his pace. I think he'll get his prep that he wants.
Yes.
But I will be very shocked if Honor Code wins this race. I'm going with Tam Marcuse. I just throwing out the last race. His Met Mile was the best race of them all.
Yes.
I think that race easily wins this. I think Scarly Charlie's going to take him a long way. But if he stops or appealing tail tops, then I think Tam Marcuse gets the dream trip, just like Smooth Roller got last week, and he just takes the lead at the top of the stretch, and Honor Code just comes plugging along. And I do think on a sloppy track, actually, appealing tail is kind of interesting. I think he could kind of freak in the slop, actually. But I'm going to go with Tam Marcuse just because I think he's the best horse at a mile distance, and he's going to get the perfect trip, whether it's fast or dry. And I'm really against Honor Code here. I just don't think he has the speed anymore to get up at a mile. So.
Well, Tam Marcuse has that turf form too, and a lot of times we see turf horses they handle the slop very well if it does get wet.
So I think it's a good race. Yeah, I think Honor Code is going to be up against it a little bit in that race. It'll be interesting to see the chatter after the race.
Right.
And I just think this is a total prep, and I think it means nothing moving forward or nothing looking back. I just think it's not a good spot for him. Although it's the spot I want him to be in. I
want him to be in it for the Breeders' Cup, but I don't want to bet him here. But I think this is an ideal race for me, or whoever's playing it. This is the exact type of race I would use in a pick 3, in a pick 4, in a pick 5, or whatever sequence, because it's a small field. You hate the favorite. This is a race where I could easily just take 4 or 5 against Honor Code, and then parlay that into other races and really try to maximize the value of beating Honor Code, who, no matter what, might be the heaviest favorite on the day.
Yeah, so we'll see how that shakes out. And I think you're right. I mean, if it's sloppy, I think he'll get bet even more, and I don't think it helps his chances anymore. I mean, I think if he does win, he's just going to win, but I don't think he's really going to win. I just think he doesn't have...
I think it works both ways. Like, if he loses here, it'll be great, because like you said, I still think he'll get a fantastic prep. This is the perfect race you'd want to see him in prepping. But if he loses here, people are going to overreact, and it might actually help us on the day in the Breeders' Cup, because people will say, look at him, he lost that short field G2, when really there's no reason people should be looking at this race to give them a sign for what he will or won't do in the Breeders' Cup. It's completely different.
Yeah, it's going to be the overreaction 101. The Flower Bowl, I mean, I was excited about this field. I assume, unless literally that hurricane stays a hurricane, they'll keep it on the turf, but it does make for a completely different handicapping puzzle if it's soft versus firm versus good.
It does, to an extent. For me, I go with the same horse regardless. Kirby is a very, very, very nice horse overseas. A couple of her wins were extremely nice. Her one in Ascot in particular, she was boxed in completely, and Ryan Moore forced her way out of there, and she just mowed them down and destroyed. Over a mile and a half that she had to run over her last 2 times. She wasn't nearly as effective, but she comes back now here to 10 furlongs, which is straight in her wheelhouse. And I mean, even the races where she was quote-unquote bad, a half a length behind Place Caught, Covert Love, and C. Khaleesi. Okay, those are horses that are all running on the Arc de Triomphe weekend in Grade 1s. This is top class form we're talking about. She would be the favorite in a G1 race over there. So I don't see any way that Kirby does not win this race.
Yeah, it's a couple different ways I was looking at it. I'm handicapping for an extremely soft course and a boggy course. And under those conditions, a horse that I've not liked all year long, I'm going to go with Stephanie's Kitten, just because I just like an older horse that's run a lot of races, that is slow and methodical, and that's who I want on a boggy course like this. So I'm hoping for a boggy course, and if it is, I think Stephanie's Kitten is actually going to run a better race, and I think this is the condition she wants. She wants a slow, boggy course and a slow final time and nobody to quicken, and I think that's where it sets up for Stephanie.
It does, to an extent. I mean, I can definitely see that logic. She ran very well in the Beverly D, and I mean, I don't think there's any way of us knowing how soft that course really was because it was raining the whole time. It was, only progressively getting worse throughout the day. And I thought that she ran pretty well in that spot, so I couldn't fault you there.
The Champagne, it's kind of an interesting race. 2-year-old boys stretching out. I think the betting's going to get pretty compacted into 3-4 horses. I do notice Tal of Saval and Rafting get first Lasix, and Sal Ahoy runs again with no Lasix, and Sal Ahoy is currently your 2016 Kentucky Derby Future Book favorite.
There you go. Okay. This is an interesting field. We get Magnolite back, who had his one big run in the Stanford and got DQ'd from that, and then came back and lost to Rallis. I don't know what was going on that day, but Doug O'Neill's horses were winning everywhere, so that was interesting. Rallis I couldn't take here. I expect him to regress off of that big run. I don't think that he's going to replicate that. And I don't think he's that good. I mean, I saw a lot of him in California before he came over here, and I guess he needs to do it again. I'm just not convinced that he's that good, even if I don't think that the horses here are, amazing. I guess for me, I'm going to go with Tail of Saval. Obviously, the most unexposed of these has only ran one time and won, but it was a very nice win coming from behind. And again, we tend to see some of these horses who begin with that sort of come up from behind style thrive in these races where they're meeting a bigger field than they did last time. So, Tail of Saval, my pick here.
Yeah, Rallis actually looked pretty impressive the last time. Again, I think the weather's going to play a role here. If it's sloppy, you could go a couple of different ways. I'm going to just go with Greenpoint Crusader. I really love the pedigree. I love the pedigree for the mud. And Crypto Clearance back in the day when daily racing form used to have mud marks, he had the superior mud marks. So I think, and there's some mud, definitely 2-3 generations on both sides here. He does have that extra race, so I think he's got a little bit of conditioning. Maybe it gets dry in the middle of the afternoon. It's a deep demanding track. So I guess either way, I'm going to take him just because I like him on a dry demanding track. And that extra race I just think is going to help him. But I mean, Rallis, you could go either way. I mean, he actually did look pretty good. I just thought the race, the horses entered were just, going into that race, you knew it was kind of a goofy race. So I'm not really sure who he beat and how he did it.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, you have to. This is one of the races too where I think it's hard to handicap in advance. You really have to look at how the track is. I think, like I said, the horse like Tail of Saval, if it's muddy and drying, you usually want one of those come from behind horses. So I think he could be one of those. If it's just straight sloppy, I think you have to give a long look to Rafting, being by Tappet, the Chris S underneath. That's a breeding that should be beneficial over a sloppy surface. We see a lot of Tappets just freak in that kind of circumstances, and even a horse like Ready Dancer, I think if it's sloppy is another one who I'd give a look to, but if it's dry, then you have to completely change it, because I think if it's muddy or sloppy, it eliminates some of these horses from contention. A horse like Magnolite, who I think, maybe I wouldn't play him to win over a dry track, but I certainly would have to consider him, and if it's sloppy, I just kind of don't even give him a look.
No, there's a few horses that I would consider, like, it's interesting because neither one of us, I mean, the favorite might be Sal Ahoy, and neither one of them really, us like him on either track, so that's interesting. But like Tom's Ready, if it's a total slop fest, well, Daredevil was by More Than Ready last year, and he crushed in the slop, and those More Than Readys love the slop. So
that's what I was saying, Ready Dancer.
Ready's Dancer, so I mean, if it's sloppy, I'd play him. Actually, if it's sloppy, I kind of like Magna Light. But if it's not, then to me it's just a whole other guessing game. Although I do think the pedigree on Greenpoint Crusader does indicate he'll like the slot, but I just think he's kind of a decent horse anyways. I wasn't impressed with Sal. I mean, I was impressed going into the race, and I don't know, maybe it was just a 3-horse dog fight, and he's learning the game and is better than I think, but I don't know, I was much more impressed with Tal of Saval than Sal Ahoy, I guess.
Oh, no, exactly the same for me, and Yeah, I mean, I think people just latch on to some of these Phipps horses straight out the gate, and we talk about this every year with young horses, is that at this point in time, we don't know how good any of them are yet, but people will latch onto, a Shug Phipps horse and want it to be good. So they can get overbet off of people wanting the horse to be better than they are. We saw this with Honor Code a lot, and, with him as a juvenile, he was right in there. I mean, just as competitive with a Cairo Prince and, maybe a little bit better than Wicked Strong, but there was a group of about 4 of them in Havana that they were all extremely similar as far as how good they were at that point, but people wanted Honor Code to be good, so he was overbet every single time. And I think this is a kind of horse that you can see that with potentially happening because of the connections.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, if Rallis, like I say, I didn't really like him going into that last race, but
I didn't at all.
I was impressed just the way he looked physically. Like he had filled out a little bit, and he's just kind of a big, long striding horse. So like a horse like that, maybe he's just kind of the now horse. Is he going to be around next May? Who cares? I mean, maybe he's just the horse to play now. So I will be watching him. And I do think he's got some scope and size to him. I just don't really know where that race kind of came out of the last time. And I'm thinking maybe some other horses just kind of underachieved. So I think weather will play a role, and the track condition will determine who actually wins the race. Same thing that could be true for the Jockey Club Gold Cup. We've got the Pride from the land of Lincoln, looks to spare, shipping in from the mountain, 74-1 winner the last time, and now he's ready to take on the world.
Great placement, isn't it? I mean, are you ever going to find a G1 race that's more cut up than this? Heck, I mean, what do they pay? Like 5 places if he just beats one horse by, I guess.
No, they actually play all 6 in the stakes races, so he gets plenty.
So they're getting banked no matter what. I mean, that's a great job by the connections though to get him in this sort of a race. You'll never have a better chance of hitting the board or finishing 4th or even something. I mean, weird things can happen in small fields, and I'm not taking looks to spare to win by any means, but fantastic job by them to find a spot that was weak and jump right all over it. This race for me, it's interesting because we've seen something similar to this. We saw Tonalist go against FNX and Coach Inge in a small field just a couple starts back, and he lost. FNX just nipped Coach Inge at the wire in that race, or I guess he just nipped Tonalist at the wire there with Coach Inge just in behind. That day I thought Coach Inge on paper projected his lone speed, and instead, I don't remember who it was now, but there was somebody in the race who went forward with him. I thought Coach Inge ran a very big race that day. Having to tackle a little bit more pressure than I had anticipated him having to deal with. Now, this race I think really hinges all on Constitution. The Constitution that, we know gets out of the gate and does his normal thing, well then that's going to lead us to a contested pace between him and Coach Inge. He was slow out of the gate last time, but though it was Constitution. And he does that fairly often. He tends to especially do it fresh for some reason. Every time he's first up, he misses the start. I couldn't have Constitution here, but I do expect him to be on the lead along with Coach Inge, and I think that'll set it up for some of these other horses. Tonalist, I am very intrigued that they've kept the blinkers off. I wanted him to have no blinkers in the Breeders' Cup because there's so much speed in there and because it's a large field, but him not having them here is interesting. With the small field, I'm concerned that he could find himself too far behind, because that's how, with no blinkers, he has no gate speed, so he could very well be out the back in this race, and I'm not so sure that's the way you want to approach this race if you're looking to win. But he could run a very good race here, finish second. He still would be one who I'd be looking to bet on the day in the Breeders' Cup. But at 6-5 without the blinkers, I'm a little bit hesitant of him here. The horse who I'm going to bet here is Wicked Strong, that he ran well in the Woodward to get 3rd there. He'll be more forwardly placed than Tonalist, and I think that'll be the difference. That he'll be able to park in there behind a contested pace, and he'll get first run. And if he runs and Tonalist finishes the closing second, I think that's all you can ask for going into this race for both of those horses for the Breeders' Cup. I think, horses like FNX or Coach Inge or Constitution are the ones who really have questions to answer here?
Well, I think it's very similar to the Champagne. If it's totally a slot fest, and this race will be right after it, right after the Champagne.
Tonalist.
Then you can lean totalist, and you probably like Constitution a little bit more, just because I think with he's got the Tappet breeding, and he'll probably be just flashing along on an easy lead, and they could run 1-2 all the way around. I mean, not 1-2 all the way around, but Tonalist would be joining the fray after 6-7 furlongs, especially if he's ridden a little bit more aggressive. I am disappointed without blinkers, because on a fast track, I think Tonalist would be just like Undercoat. Like, I think he gets 14, 15 lengths behind. It'll be a slow pace, and and Wicked Strong will get the first jump, and would beat him. So, I mean, I'm picking Tonalist just because everything just points to a sloppy track and raining and whatever. So I think Tonalist is going to win, but if Wicked Strong gets the first jump, he wins, because they're even, and Wicked Strong has had 4 straight races where he hasn't had the lead at the top of the stretch. Everything points to him having the lead at the top of the stretch on a normal track, but again, if it's sloppy, then it could be Constitution. Coach Inge, I have a lot of respect for, and he's ran a lot of races, and the last time out he purposely rated, and he ran well. I just don't think that's going to work in this spot, just because I think Wicked Strong is going to be ridden more aggressively, and I think Constitution is going to be ridden more aggressively, and that's not going to be a good matchup for Coach Inge, although, I mean, he still will probably run a good race. I just can't see any possible way Coach Inge can win this race. I just think he's going to run a good race, so I don't really know what that means.
No, I agree. That's not how I see him. Like, he's tough, he's honest, he tries everything. He's one of these horses who he's genuine. He gives everything in every race he has, but a lot of times he's just not quite good enough at this level. And like, if I had to sit here and say, okay, who's the horse who I think I'd bet him to hit the board but not win, it'd be him. Like, it's hard to make a case for him to win, but it's very easy to make a case for him to hit the board. I will comment on, I guess the way I gave my picks was more of how I'd look at this on a dry track. I completely agree. You move up Tonalist on a sloppy track, but I wouldn't discount the others. I think should the track come up sloppy, Tonalist would get hammered, and my bet then would in turn be a Constitution, Wicked Strong, Exacta. Constitution, like you say, on the lead. He's bred to handle a sloppy track for one, but especially on the lead, I think he would be very dangerous over those sorts of circumstances. But I wouldn't discount Wicked Strong either. His debut was over a sloppy track. He lost by 5.5 lengths behind a Manhattan Johnny who made all and who was 3-2 on the day. But he ran a sneaky good race there. He traveled very well over the slop. He just needed the race, which we see a lot from these Jerkins runners. So just because we haven't seen him run over the slop now doesn't mean that he can't. I actually think, this hard spun and charismatic, what we saw from him on debut, I don't think that he would be overly hindered by a sloppy track.
Yeah, and I think he drew inside. Joel Rosario goes back on him after Luis Saez the last couple of races. And, Tonalist gets John Velasquez, who, he's still a good jock, but boy, he's put in some strange rides this year on this horse and on other horses.
He's been very disappointing, I would say, on this horse. His last race in particular, I know you and I have talked about this, but if you go back and you watch the Whitney and you see where he's positioned compared to Honor Code throughout, he's in front of him, which is exactly where he should be. Without blinkers, he's going to be out the back, but he should always be in front of Honor Code, which he was. But Johnny Velasquez let Honor Code get the first jump on Tonalist. That's what lost him the race. Would he have beat Honor Code anyway? Maybe not, but he would have been, I firmly believe, had Tonalist gone first, he would have been substantially closer, if not winning the race. So that was a puzzling run. I'm as surprised as I am that he has no blinkers here. I'm equally as surprised that Velasquez still has the mount, because I thought they said something like he had committed to 3 races and then they were going to decide what to do, and I guess they've decided to keep him.
Yeah, now it's they're committed. He's committed to this race, and I assume the Breeders' Cup. So
yeah, this is it.
So this is it. What's interesting is somehow, it doesn't really matter how he does it, if it's sloppy track or a dry track. Theoretically, I mean, it's only a 6-horse field, and we're throwing out the Land of Lincoln horse.
Yeah.
If Constitution does go wire to wire or somehow grid out a win, Castellano would have Liam's Map, Constitution, and Honor Code. Now, nobody's really talked about it because Liam's Map hasn't committed to the Classic, but that's where he's going.
Oh, he is.
And I think the problem is that Castellano basically has committed to Honor Code without committing to Honor Code, and therefore there's a lot of jockeys that could switch around here, and I think a lot of people are going to way overread into, oh, he likes Honor Code better than Liam's Map, and no, it's just because he promised.
It's been a long-term commitment between.
It was a long-term commitment, and Shug gave him 2 back-to-back grade 1s, and he can't get off Honor Code to take Liam's Map.
No, though Constitution, I would be intrigued. If he might be the one that they go dirt mile with. I wouldn't be surprised. That race has come up very weak now. With that breeding, I don't think it matters. You know, if he gets, you know, he already has the Dawn. If he can pile on now a Breeders' Cup win, that should be, you know, money in the bank with his pedigree. So maybe then he could run him if he runs him in the dirt mile. So they're prepping him here. Yes, this is a win and you're in for the Classic, but I wonder if they came here more out of circumstance with how the race has turned out than actually really thinking we're going to put him in the Classic. If he showed up in the dirt mile, I wouldn't be shocked, I guess I would say.
Yeah, this year it's a little bit tricky though. Twin Creeks is another owners that they don't play for the dirt mile. They're another one. Windstar Farm, their farm's 7 miles away from there. I just think they're going to, I mean, I think everybody wants to win the Classic at Keeneland the first time it's at Keeneland. I think more and more of these horses are pointing more for the Classic. That's where they want to run. And now, granted, if he just fades out of here, it's a moot point. I'm just saying if he wins it, they're going to take and ride the crest and go to the Breeders' Cup Classic. But he's got to win it first, so maybe it doesn't matter. But I do think, you know, there'll be a lot of people overreading and overreacting into the decisions, and I think the decisions are already made. They just ain't going to announce them because the way horses get hurt, why announce it before you have to?
Right. No, that's exactly.
And I think the same thing with Constitution. Like I say, if he wins, I firmly believe they'll go to the Breeders' Cup Classic, but he's got to win it. And so, you know, maybe the decision will take out of his hand if Tonalist or Wicked Strong wins, or Coach Inge. And Coach Inge, you know, Holy Bull and Boundary is a little bit of slop as well. So, I mean, I guess the way he's ran this year, and maybe this is Irad Ortiz, you know, chance to, I think it's a jockey's race. I'm a little worried with Tonalist, you know, same reason with Honor Code. He's just lost his speed ever since, you know, surprisingly, he had the speed a little bit in that Westchester. But, you know, these older horses, you know, whenever these older horses just don't start to show any speed, it's very worrisome. It's just not a good sign. And
I think he's fine. I think, you know, we're talking an Honor Code or a Tonalist, so I do firmly believe over 10 furlongs, they're fine, but a lot of that is because most of the horses in any given field don't stay 10, so
that's
it
the problem.
automatically
Like, they
makes
look
them
like
a
they're
contender.
motoring.
I prefer this prep though for Honor Code versus the. I mean, we knew Tonalist was going to go Jockey Club Gold Cup after winning it last year, and it becomes a floppy. He has a big chance, but we know he travels well over that sort of a surface. But I think people have really looked at what they're doing with the Honor Code as a negative. That's what I've seen in articles or in tweets that people are saying how worrisome that he's going to this spot and that Shug must not think he stays if he's putting him over a mile. And I don't think it's any of that. It's so smart to take a horse like him who is going to be out the back and put him over a mile, a distance that's not suitable for him, going faster, though they're going to go faster. You know, obviously milers run faster over that trip than, you know, these 10 furlong horses. They'll go at a faster pace. So that's what's going to build up his fitness. You know, you don't have to take these horses and gallop them for 5 miles to get fitness. This is a fantastic fitness builder for Honor Code.
Well, I hope the track isn't sloppy because we have seen on sloppy tracks before goofy results happen. So even though we both say, oh, Tonalist will love the slop, well, in theory, yes.
But a few of those do too.
But a few of those, yeah, I mean, I guess I'd rather for all of these races, I mean, the turf, if it rains, that's going to be good or yielding anyways, but I really don't want to see raining all day and a slop fest, because not all slops the same, and we see some of these horses just not show up. And then, you know, like I say, what if Tonalist were to run 4th by 4 lengths? Then you don't know what you have at all in the Breeders' Cup.
But then at the same breath too, yeah, these are races up front. You're betting them. You have to keep an eye on the surface, because again, if it at all at any point in the day stops raining, if we get a testing surface, okay, well then that now flips, I think, the favor to an honor code, to a tonalist. Whereas, you know, right now we're picking against them, but that's sort of a surface. Now, if you start seeing, you know, like kind of we saw this at Indiana Grand when it rained on Indiana Derby Day. And remember when it stopped raining, the surface became very testing. All of a sudden, horses every race were flying from the clouds. So that's possible. So keep an eye when you're betting. Be very careful throughout the day as you're betting. Whenever rain's involved, the track surface will often change several times throughout the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think, pace will still play a role in it just because it's a small field.
Yes.
And Constitution really is the only horse that wants a lead, fast lead.
Yeah, I just think for him, he needs to get out of the gate. We know that's a problem for him, and it was a problem for him again last time. And it was a turf race, so he made his way to the lead much easier than if he did that here.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And you know what? Maybe that was a perfect preference, because he always does seem to have gate problems first up. So maybe, you know, maybe that was the right idea. Put him on the turf, because they knew even if he had a gate problem, he'd still get to the lead, which he did. And he did set some fast fractions that day.
Yeah, I mean, we might look back and say that was a very nice fitness builder for him. Maybe they knew he needed a race to get him. You know, they knew with a horse like him coming off that injury, they would know that, you know, they're on a short timetable here to get him ready for the Classic. And I know it's not typical of Pletcher to have a horse come into a race not 100% fit, but, you know, maybe they had to go to a more extreme measure, knowing they're on a very short time frame to get him ready.
Yeah, you know, I do think he's interesting, because, like I say, I think they think this horse is a 10-furlong classic type horse, and I think his schedule was set up for that.
Yeah.
What happened was he somehow missed a prep, and so they had to throw him into that turf race as his prep.
Yeah, well, and they've always ran him as 10. I mean, even the plans, even before he got hurt, they were saying they were going to send him to the Dubai World Cup before he got hurt. That's 10 furlongs over the dirt, over a track that was playing fairly testing, kind of Saratoga-esque for as far as main tracks go. So they, no matter what other people are saying, they have never wavered from the belief that he is a classic distance horse.
Yeah, or at least they think he's a grade 1 horse, so they want to run him in graded races. So, but like you say, maybe reality hits him upside the head and he's stuck in the mile. But I just think, like I say, I'm not picking him either. I just, like, if this horse wins by 2.5 lengths, I could see the momentum really switching, and all of a sudden everybody was like, oh, wow, Constitution in the Classic.
Oh, but again, that might be a good thing, because he's a horse who always takes money. I remember you and I said back when he missed the Kentucky Derby from injury, you and I both said, oh my gosh, that's the one horse we knew would take a lot of money who we didn't want to bet. He always takes money. So should he run in the Classic or wherever he runs, if he's a horse who, you know, for whatever reason, pace or whatnot, you're against, he always takes money. So you want him to be in your races. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, win or lose, we just hope that horses like Honor Code and Tonalist run well. I think it would be a real shame. I mean, these are all going to run the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think it'd be a real shame if Honor Code won't, but I think a Tonalist in particular, if he ran poorly and then maybe they consider a dirt mile or cigar mile, and I don't want them to mess with any of that. I want him in the Classic.
No, I want them all in there now. I either want none of them or all of them. So now at this point, I'm committed to having all 6 in there. And then you get, then you get odds on all of them.
I just don't want anyone to have second thoughts after this weekend.
Yeah, so, and I'm more worried about Tonalist than Honor Code, because Honor Code, the plan is the plan.
Yes.
And this, I don't think the plan changes. I do think the plan changes. If Wicked Strong wins, he's in.
Yes.
And if Constitution wins, I think he's in. So, I mean, it does change.
I want all these horses to go to the Classic. I'm fearful that somebody's going to, at some point, if one of these runs bad, they're going to sit there and say, well, look, nobody's going dirt mile, I guess I will. And I want them, these horses, this group, I think it's a bona fide group of classic distance horses. It'd be a shame if you know, if it was due to the weather or whatever, one of them ran subpar, and then all of a sudden we see them in the mile.
So yeah, hopefully we get at least drying out track at a minimum, and at least not raining during a few of these stakes races, just to keep them all, you know, who knows? I mean, if it rains a lot, some of these guys may scratch, and then they don't even get the prep.
Yeah, snow, that's exactly it.
You know, and that's even, to me, that's even worse. But, you know, so, you know, you don't want it to just be a disaster rain-wise, and then a couple of these guys get cold feet and just say, well, I don't want to miss my date with the Breeders' Cup. So that's going to do it for this week. Next week, down to the wire, we're going to take a roundtable look, I believe, at the Breeders' Cup, and then in a couple of weeks, we'll take a look at the Euros. So we'll be getting ready for the Breeders' Cup really the next couple of weeks, and really focusing on that over the next month. That's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.